Imagine, for a moment, being plunged into the pitch-black abyss of the Pacific Ocean in 1942. You are sitting on a tiny, unarmored wooden boat, essentially a floating gasoline can. Looming dead ahead is a heavily armored, 3,000-ton steel behemoth of the enemy navy, armed to the teeth. It sounds like an absolute suicide mission, a literal case of throwing an egg against a rock. Yet, in one of the most astonishing David versus Goliath counter-kills in naval history, a handful of American wooden patrol torpedo boats not only faced down this terrifying leviathan, but miraculously sent it straight to the bottom of the ocean. This seemingly impossible victory did not just alter the local trajectory of the Pacific War. It elevated a naval tactic, once dismissed as merely expendable, to the stage of military legend. Today, we are going to pierce through the fog of war, return to those desperate, smoke-filled waters of Guadalcanal, and uncover the shocking truth behind how a few would unboat sink a steel monster. The clock winds back to the night of December 11th, 1942, exactly 20 to 47. The waters off Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands are swallowed by absolute darkness. Slicing through the waves is the PT-37, a wooden torpedo boat commanded by Lieutenant Lester Gamble. The 28-year-old commander has his eyes locked on a southbound enemy destroyer formation. Gamble has been fighting in the relentless meat grinder of the Solomon Islands for 5 agonizing months. Yet he has never actually sunk an enemy destroyer in surface combat. Tonight, his target is the infamous supply convoy, and leading the pack is the pride of the enemy navy. This colossal warship is an apex predator of the seas. At 440 feet long and displacing nearly 3,000 tons fully loaded, this steel titan is equipped with trapid fire guns. It boasts the most advanced optical fire control system the enemy navy has to offer. In stark contrast, Lieutenant Gamble's ride is a mere 77 feet long, cobbled together from mahogany and plywood. Its fully loaded displacement is a pitiful 40 tons, not even a fraction of its adversary's weight. The boat is powered by 3 Packard Marine engines. The moment they hit their top speed of over 30 knots, their deafening, monstrous roar echoes across the water like the howling of banshees. Its armament is incredibly sparse, for notorious Mark 8 torpedoes and 2 twin 50 caliber machine gun mounts. The enemy warship has armor, heavy artillery, and a crew of 350 men. Gamble's wooden boat has 11 men in zero armor. The sheer disparity is staggering. In the deadly waters of the Solomons, the PT boat squadrons were widely considered short-lived anomalies. In just 2 months, the 3rd PT squadron had already lost 4 boats, with 18 men killed and 23 severely wounded. The enemy contemptuously dismissed them as mosquito boats, swatting them away as mere nuisances. Even within the high command of the U.S. Navy, these brave crews were tragically viewed as suicide jockeys and expendable assets. But tonight, these very wooden boats, despised by the enemy and undervalued by their own commanders, are about to manifest a miracle. Commanding the Japanese Tokyo Express tonight is Rear Admiral Raizo Tanaka, famously known as Tenacious Tanaka and an undisputed master of night naval combat. For 6 months, he has repeatedly pierced American air patrols to deliver crucial supplies to the starving Japanese troops on Guadalcanal, exacting a heavy toll on the United States Navy in the process. Tonight marks his 4th drum run of December. 11 destroyers loaded with buoyant drums packed with rice and ammunition are preparing to drop their cargo near the shoreline. Facing this overwhelming armada, Gamble's forces are incredibly fragile. Alongside his PT-37 are only 2 other wooden boats, PT-40 and PT-48. 3 wooden boats and a total of 12 torpedoes are all that stand against an elite Japanese formation that has previously ripped apart armored American cruisers. The 11 crewmen on Gamble's boat range from a seasoned 32-year-old down to teenagers as young as 19. In the sweltering, suffocating tropical heat, the motor men are nursing the temperamental engines The torpedo men are desperately trying to ensure their highly defective weapons will actually launch, and the gunners are gripping their 50 calls, preparing to shoot at thick steel plating. One single hit from the destroyer's main guns would vaporize the wooden boat into a cloud of splinters and fire. To make matters worse, the Japanese acoustic and flash spotting equipment is incredibly lethal, highly capable of pinpointing the PT boats in the pitch black. As midnight approaches, the tension thickens to the point of suffocation. American intelligence had broadcasted the convoy's movements hours earlier. Marine dive bombers had harassed them at dusk, to no avail. Tanaka's fleet has successfully dropped their supply drums and is now turning to sprint back to safety at high speed. Staring through his binoculars, Gamble knows the grim reality because the United States Mark 8 torpedoes have a horrific failure rate of over 60%. He cannot afford to fire from a safe distance. He must close the gap to a suicidal 1,000 yards. Inside that range, every single gun on the Japanese destroyer can bear down on PT-37. Gamble eases the throttles forward. He does not go to maximum power. He needs to slip through the darkness like a ghost. The Packard engines emit a low, throaty rumble as the 3 PT boats, from a column, creeping toward the steel leviathan. The sea is relatively calm and heavy clouds obscure the stars. There is no moonlight. It is the perfect cloak for an ambush, but a nightmare for targeting. With no radar and no advanced fire control, Gamble relies entirely on a stopwatch, his binoculars, and his raw instincts to calculate the enemy's speed and distance based solely on their faint silhouettes. The distance shrinks agonizingly. 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards. The towering superstructure of the Teruzuki materializes in the gloom. Gamble can even make out the faint glow of the Japanese searchlight housings. He has to get closer. Suddenly, the night is shattered. The Japanese have spotted them. Brilliant, blinding searchlights snap on, cutting through the darkness like the scythe of the grim Reaper, painting the American wooden boats in a glaring, inescapable light. Instantly, the Teruzuki's 5-inch main batteries erupt in a deafening roar. High explosive shells scream through the air, detonating just 100 yards off the PT boat's bows, sending geysers of seawater crashing down onto the open decks. Gamble slams the throttles all the way to the stops. The engines scream as they are pushed to their absolute limits. This is the essence of PT boat doctrine: hit hard, cause chaos, and run like hell. Seizing the momentary confusion as the Japanese adjust their firing solutions, Gamble violently throws the helm over banking PT-37 hard to port to line up the perfect firing angle. His thumb smashes down on the firing button. With a violent hiss of compressed air, to massive 3,000-pound torpedoes leap from their tubes and plunge into the churning black water. Instantly shedding 6,000 pounds of weight, PT-37 bucks wildly. Gamble does not wait to watch. He throws the wheel hard starboard, and the boat rockets away at a blistering 41 knots, zigzagging frantically to avoid the incoming artillery fire. Every man on deck holds their breath, staring back at the dark water. 60 seconds, 40 seconds, 10 seconds, silence, just the roar of their own engines. And then the ocean erupts, a catastrophic, earth-shattering explosion tears the night sky wide open. A column of water and fire shoots 200 feet into the air directly behind the enemy destroyer. The blinding flash illuminates the panicked faces of the enemy sailors scrambling on the steel decks. Mark 8 torpedo has struck home, slamming perfectly into the destroyer's port-side stern. But the real miracle is the location of the hit. The torpedo has ripped open the heavy fuel-loyal bunkers of the enemy warship. Thousands of gallons of highly flammable fuel spew into the ocean and ignite instantly. The steel behemoth is suddenly engulfed in a raging inferno, transforming the dark Pacific into a terrifying lake of fire. On the deck of the fleeing PT-37, Gamble and his men are nearly knocked off their feet by the shockwave. They look back in absolute awe. The mosquito boat has just crippled the pride of the enemy fleet. The wounded beast is the most dangerous kind, and the reality of naval warfare is brutally unforgiving. The stern of the warship is a blazing inferno, but its forward rapid-fire guns are still fully operational. Worse, the colossal fire has illuminated the surrounding waters, stripping away the PT boats' only defense, the darkness. The enemy admiral, witnessing his prized destroyer burning, is sent into a blinding rage. He orders the rest of his fleet to halt their retreat, turn their guns, and obliterate the wooden American boats. The enemy's searchlights sweep frantically, catching PT-40 and PT-110 in their deadly beams. Lieutenant Frank Freeland, commanding PT-44, tries to execute a high-speed S-turn to launch a secondary attack, but the enemy gunners are too fast. Without the cover of night, the wooden boats are sitting ducks. A 5-inch-high explosive shell howls through the air and scores a direct hit on the port side of PT-44. There is no sound of scraping metal, only the horrific, muffled thud of mahogany and plywood being vaporized. The wooden boat shatters like a matchbox hit by a sledgehammer. In a blinding flash, PT-44 disintegrates into a cloud of burning splinters, claiming the lives of Lieutenant Freeland and his men before they can even register the impact. Simultaneously, PT-110 finds itself trapped in a hailstorm of machine, gun, and secondary battery fire. The wooden hull is shredded into a sieve, fuel lines rupture, and flames immediately consume the deck. The crew is forced to abandon ship, diving into the burning, oil-slicked waters as their boat explodes and slips beneath the waves. Blood, fire, and the stench of cordage choke the air. Gamble's PT-37 manages to escape into the shadows, but witnessing the fiery demise of his sister ships leaves a heavy, suffocating weight on the crew's chests. At exactly 3:15 in the morning, the inevitable happens. The flames finally reach the depth charges. A secondary explosion hundreds of times more violent than the initial torpedo strike obliterates the Teruzuki. The brilliant white flash blinds observers miles away, and the concussive shockwave triggers a localized tidal wave. With an agonizing, deafening shriek of tearing metal, the 440-foot-long symbol of Japanese naval supremacy is snapped violently in half. Thousands of tons of molten steel engulfed in thick black smoke begin their final desperate plunge into the crushing depths of the Iron Bottom Sound, taking with them the arrogance and ambitions of the Imperial Navy. When the first rays of dawn finally break through the clouds, they reveal a scarred and desolate ocean. Debris, oil slicks, and empty life rafts bob silently on the waves, the only tombstones for the brutal clash of the night before. American search and rescue planes buzz low over the water, desperately hunting for the young survivors of the wooden fleet. The news of this battle sends shockwaves all the way to the Pentagon. For months, the top brass had scoffed at the PT boat program. Admirals in comfortable briefing rooms believed these unarmored wooden toys had no place in modern, industrialized naval combat. They were deemed too fragile, too unreliable, and sending men out in them was considered borderline murder. But Lieutenant Gamble and his men, armed with nothing but plywood and rock courage, used the shattered remains of the Teruzuki to silence every single critic. 3 tiny wooden boats displacing less than 150 tons combined had charged headlong into an elite Japanese destroyer squadron. Despite losing to boats and suffering tragic casualties, they successfully sank a 3,000-ton front-line warship. This was not just a successful ambush, it was a total paradigm shift in naval warfare. Overnight, the perception of the PT boats flipped. They were no longer expendables. They became the revered assassins of the sea. Their incredibly shallow draft allowed them to glide over coral reefs where heavy destroyers dared not tread. Their blistering speed allowed them to strike from the shadows and vanish into the night. Their cheap and fast production meant the American industrial juggernaut could pump them out by the hundreds. From the Solomons to the Philippines, the PT boats entered their golden age. Painted with menacing shark mouths, they hunted Japanese supply barges, conducted daring coastal reconnaissance, and rescued downed aviators. A young John F. Kennedy would soon etch his own name into this legacy, aboard PT-109, further immortalizing the wooden fleet in American history. And it all started on that suffocating pitch-black night of December 11, 1942. It started the moment Lieutenant Lester Gamble stared down a steel monster and pressed the firing button. Those young faces on those wooden decks proved that in the crucible of war, victory is not solely dictated by the thickness of your armor or the caliber of your guns. It is dictated by the unbreakable will and the sheer terrifying audacity of the human spirit. The heroes who vanished into the dark waters that night merged with the Pacific, becoming eternal beacons of courage. And if you stand on the shores of Guadalcanal today as the night falls and the ocean wind picks up, if you listen closely enough, you might just hear the ghostly thundering roar of a Packard engine tearing through the darkness, charging fearlessly toward the steel beasts once more. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history's deadliest miscalculations, smash that like button and subscribe. I am your strategy observer. I will see you on the next battlefield.